And ASAP serves as kind of technical support for the Solarize program. We've been involved since it began in 2018.
Excellent. Kristen, do you want to introduce yourself and your role with Solarize in the past too?
Sure. Thanks, Chanel. Thanks for giving me the space to speak. Sorry, I was a little late. My name is Kristen Collins. I'm volunteering on this program this year for 2021. I helped start the program in 2018 alongside Chris, who just spoke, in the Airport Heights community. This program is very near and dear to my heart. When I was on staff at the Alaska Center in Solarize Anchorage, it was my favorite program to work with. And so I appreciate, Chanel, the space to be involved this year. I'm just on the call to answer any questions that may relate to my experience in previous campaigns and to support Chanel. What I love about this program, it's a win-win for everybody. It is a good feeling community project for people to conduct in their neighborhoods, and you get cheaper solar. It starts jobs in the community, and is overall a win for everybody.
Woo! Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for being here. With that, let's get started with the presentation. Jenny Marie, thank you. So,
Chanel, I'm also going to interrupt you really quick. If folks have questions that we'll take those at the end. The other thing you can do is throw them in the chat, and I'll be accumulating them for Chanel or whoever needs to answer. So thanks.
Great. Thanks, Chris, for mentioning that. I always forget to say that, so I appreciate it. All right, getting started. Solarize, as Kristen mentioned, is a grassroots campaign that brings neighborhoods together to invest in solar. These campaigns have been conducted across the nation. So far, there have been 9 Solarize campaigns here in Anchorage. We've also seen a lot of enthusiasm from communities across the state. In fact, Solarize Fairbanks just completed their first year, and they're moving on to their second. Here at the Alaska Center, we enjoy spending our resources to facilitate this campaign just because it gives people the opportunity to invest in better energy, save on their electricity bills, and reduce carbon footprints. With that, here's what we have in store for you today. In the first half of the hour, I'll be presenting on program basics, past campaigns, application necessities, example pricing from the past, and incentives that we have here and now, as well as the goalpost campaign timeline. Then we'll be addressing Q&A, like Kristen said, with insights from both Chris and Kristen. I'm sorry, keep getting your names mixed up. All right. So Solarize Anchorage is a community-run and community-driven campaign that makes solar energy accessible and affordable for homeowners, as well as commercial property owners in the area by eliminating 3 market barriers. The first is cost, then complexity, and third is customer inertia. So starting out with high upfront cost, because your community in this program is purchasing together from one installer, you're all able to secure a volume discount by the end, i.e. you'll get bulk pricing on top of the incentives already in place with federal tax credits and net metering. Second, with complexity. For a lot of folks, a solar purchase seems like a really daunting and complex decision with choices about technical issues like inverter efficiency, PV modules, and optimal array tilt. Even choosing between contractors can be really overwhelming for some, like me. But by having a selection committee from your area choose the installer that reflects your community's values and priorities, it turns investing into a yes or no question for solar. Third, with commercial customer inertia. Usually the sales cycle for solar is more than 2 years from the first inquiry all the way up to installation. The Solarize project cuts that time down to 3 to 6 months. Using a tiered pricing structure, more signups means more saving. So the threshold needs a limited timeline to finalize pricing. This provides further investment incentive to homeowners. So 1, 2, 3, high upfront costs, complexity, and customer inertia. Now, let's chat about past campaigns. So this program piloted first with a small campaign in Airport Heights. it was intentionally kept at a small scale at the start, so it wouldn't expand past the point of facilitation. Once Airport Heights was a success, Alaska Center and ASEP chose to expand the program to include more neighborhoods in the next year, in 2019. So in that year, South Addition, Rogers Park, Turnagain, and Spenard all had separate campaigns with 3 separate installers participate. We expanded again in 2020 with 4 campaigns in 5 neighborhoods in University Tudor, Bayshore Clat, Abbott Loop, and Rabbit Creek. This year, because it's the last guaranteed year of federal tax credits for residential properties, and the last year that it's that like a higher percentage, 22, we're also asking interested member organizations to apply. All right. From these past campaigns, we've learned a number of elements of a successful campaign. Number one, it needs to be community driven with 3 committees of volunteers. It needs to utilize an already made network so that you're talking to your friends, your family, your church members, folks you already know. And then the volunteer committee selects the best bid from the installer, again, to cut down on complexity and to make sure it reflects that community. Then an application period opens in the spring with a deadline to participate in order to achieve tiered pricing, where more people that sign contracts, the cheaper rates get for everybody. Another thing to note is with volunteer consistency, the communities with consistent volunteers that help the outreach committee from start to finish, they tend to achieve the most installations. For example, Turnagain in 2019 got 74 homes in their community alone because they had a really organized and driven volunteering throughout the campaign. Moving on, these 3 committee structures that I talked about, the first is the steering committee. This committee is made up of the Alaska Center, ASEP, and campaign liaisons. This committee will lay out an initial campaign plan and timeline, and then develop and distribute the RFP, if I'm right, Chris. Great. Then the interview/selection committee will evaluate the bids received from contractors and select an installer. This then leads into the outreach committee. The Alaska Center and the outreach committee work in conjunction to make sure everyone in that area knows that this opportunity is available to them by hosting community workshops, sending out mailers, doing Facebook ads, community presentations, and like whatever floats the boat of the outreach committee. In order to start your community out and get these committees together, we need to meet 4 application criteria. So if we go to the next slide, you'll need to collect this information and send it to me by January 11th. Number 1, at least 2 volunteer leads. These are the leads that will help with the steering committee. Number 2, 50 contacts of homeowners in the area who are interested in seeing the campaign happen. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be signing contracts, but they're interested. Then 3, any identified community leaders or other volunteers that you know of. And 4, Zoom or video capabilities, or if you need help with that, for community meetings. And I'd like to note here that this model can be used by anybody, not just those communities that end up applying and that are selected through the program that we're running. It's really like effective, so it's not an end all be all if your application isn't together. So with that, let's chat about incentives in Alaska right now, and then go through example costs and price structures from past campaigns, because I get a lot of questions about that. So other than the Solarize campaign bulk discount with tiered pricing, we have 2 incentives here. Number 1, the federal ITC tax credit, which is also known as the federal solar tax credit. This tax credit allows you to deduct a percentage of installation costs for a solar energy system from your federal taxes. The ITC this year is 22% for 2021, and it sunsets for homeowners in 2022. Also next year, it's like 10%, which is less than half. So once your system is installed, net metering will then help you with electricity cost savings. To go through the technical aspect, renewable energy systems with a capacity of up to 25 kilowatts are eligible for net metering. This works by reconciling monthly or net excess generation, and then the utility credits the customer generators account for the excess kilowatts multiplied by the non-firm power rate. They don't expire, these credits. And in regular people terms, Alaska is the land of the midnight sun. And when your solar system is making more energy than you can use during the summer, that excess goes back into the grids to your neighbors. The utility will give you a credit for that excess, and the power you generated and the credits you get, you can reuse in winter months when it's considerably darker. Now, let's take a look at some example cost savings from Alaska Solar, which was chosen by 2 communities last year. Oh, Mitch, I can make a link for presentation slides and I'll be sending it to you tomorrow. So let's take a look at this, which was an example from last year. This was a 5.04 kilowatt system. The initial cost would have been in the 15K range for a system this size and on this house. After the 26% federal tax credit that year, the net cost became $11,076. And it notes at the very, on the 4th line, that with net metering benefits, the system would save $809 in the first year. 2 things I want to note with this slide. The federal tax credit is at 22% in 2021. So net costs would be in the 12K range for this system, for this example system, instead of an 11K. On top of these savings, participants receive discounts from tiered pricing with Solarize Anchorage. And I want to show you a generic example of tiered pricing from another installer, Arctic Solar Ventures. So let's say you got a 3 kilowatt system on your house through this program, and Arctic Solar Ventures was set up this really basic example pricing structure with your bid. Going through the table, the pricing would be $3.50 per watt. But if in the low capacity pricing range, but if 4 to 8 more neighbors signed on by the end of the summer, your community would reach a 25 kilowatt threshold, and you would all achieve a discount of 20 cents per watt. In a 3K system, that's $600. In a 6K system, that's $1,200. And again, this is a really generic example to demonstrate how the structure works. High and low capacity savings is going to be determined in the bid proposal. And it doesn't include variable costs like mounting, batteries, triple story homes, things like that, which will be covered during site assessments. Now, with example pricing out of the way, let's talk about a basic timeline. So in your campaign's beginning months 1 through 3, the steering committee issues a request for proposal to contract to these potential installers. The installers send bids back, selection committee score bids, and then chooses an installer. Once an installer is chosen in months 4 through 6, registration opens, outreach begins. And in the past, we've hosted webinars so folks in the community can get their questions answered directly from installers. And once folks are pretty excited, homeowners and property owners can get free site assessments from installers. Folks sign contracts, and in the final months, We do installation and construction. At the end, volume pricing is finalized. With this in mind, let's look at the specific timeline for 2021. So from now until January 11th, you prospective community leaders can submit required application information via email. And a reminder that you need at least 2 volunteers to start and 50 interested contacts in the area. By January 15th, in the next week, we will finalize communities, the RFP will be publicized, and steering teams create campaign plans for their specific communities. By February 8th, installer bids are due. Selection committee has until March 4th to score bids and decide on their installer. Then by March 5th, the installers are notified they were chosen. And from that point on, registration and outreach begins. From April to October, we can do construction and installation and celebrate that our finished program by October. With this general goalpost timeline in mind, let's talk about next steps for you, our community leads. So step 1, you want to email me directly with your intent to participate, i.e. letting me know that this is your plan. Identify any other core volunteers you may need. Remember that you need at least 2 folks to begin. Step 2, create a Google form or survey to collect 50 contacts in your community who'd like to see a campaign happen. We'll need address, email, and you may want to ask them about their general interest in volunteering, whether they want to be on a committee or if they want to help with outreach. Step 3, circulate this survey in your community until you get at least 50 contacts. Then submit by January 11th to me via email. My email is written on the slide, chanel@akcenter.org. We can also send it to you once we're done. And something to note, I'll be sending out a materials packet with these slides included tomorrow to attendees here with examples of Google form questions, and an email to send out to your community listservs, your friends, family, and networks, and social media posts. If you're having a really hard time collecting 50 contacts, then we can chat it over. Our team can offer some assistance in step 2 and 3. Whew. Thank you for listening to me for so long. So I just went through a lot of information, but in the end, it's all about people and doing good for our neighbors and our communities. This, for example, is Mr. and Mrs. Tullius in South Edition, right after their panels were installed. Michael was a community lead, and there's over 275 folks in the municipality who've made use of Solarize like them. And your neighborhood could be next. With that, thank you so much for listening to me. Let's hear any questions you have. Kristen and Chris will help to field them, and we can return to grid view as well if you'd like. You can ask questions out loud by unmuting, and we'll run first through those questions that were asked in the chat, and I'll be making a queue moving forward for any other questions. Chris, do you want to get started? Oh, actually, I'll read it out loud. So the first question was, is there a link to presentation slides available? There will be by tomorrow. Second, what kind of financing is available for installing solar? Chris, do you want to field this? I know there's some loans available, but I'm not sure the specifics.
Sure, I think folks in the past have found, I think Credit Union 1 has given loans for home energy improvements and that kind of stuff. It really depends. Home equity loans is kind of where people have had the best luck in the past and gotten the best rates. That's one of the things that we try to work with the installers on, is specifically to line up a line of credit or something for people that want to participate. I know that at least one of the installers works with a company called Mosaic, and they're actually a national company that tries to finance residential solar. So it kind of just depends on a case-to-case basis. Kristen, I don't know if you had anything from last year that was beyond that.
Nope, that's
Great.
Okay, great. Next question was, where are panels installed for optimal energy production? Typically, it's the south side because that's where we get the most sunlight, like rooftop south side, I believe. But this can be addressed in site assessments where the installers will like analyze it for you and tell you how much energy production will be made on any south side wall or ground installs. Yeah. So the next question is, I've seen on rooftops and sides of buildings. Yes, both of those.
And so typically what it just kind of depends on the space that's available and any like shading that is on site. And so what happens is if people have interest in solar, the first thing they'll do is they'll ask for a site assessment so that the installer would come out to their home, take a look at the property, take a look at the roof line. Obviously some roof lines face east-west, and so you may not be possible to install solar on the south side. And then they would, based upon the layout of the roof, they'll use some software and make a model of the expected generation that solar would produce.
That's a much more nuanced answer. I'm so glad you're on here. Thank you. All right. So after that, the question is, you need new roof / siding on prior to installation. Usually not. If your roof is at the like very end of its life, it may be a good idea to reinstall that, but typically you have to like analyze the cost of the rest of your roof life versus the cost of taking up the panels and then putting them back down. Usually the second option is cheaper. If you have, Chris, is that right?
Yeah, generally, I mean, one of the things I've heard the installers say in the past is if your roof has less than 5 years left, then you should replace your roof before you get solar. And if it has more than that, then if it's like between 5 and 10, then you can kind of play it by ear. If it's more than 10, then you should be okay. Installers will also generally give you a quote to tell you how much it's going to be to kind of lift that solar system and remove it if you do need a roof replacement in the future, so that you can kind of incorporate that into your cost assessment as well.
Right.
Chris, I remember, and maybe you do too, someone in Spenard redid their roof and there's maybe even some siding of their house in combination with getting the panels on. Do you remember if those costs are able to be included in the tax credit at all, as in part of the construction for them?
So I have heard that some people will try to use the tax credit for the part of the roof that is covered by solar panels, but the official answer is I'm not a tax professional, and I would recommend that you ask your tax professional to get that advice.
Yeah, I know some people last year like applied, but we don't really know how it went. So definitely, I agree. I don't think there are any more chat questions left. If anybody else has, oh, go ahead, Jenny Marie.
I think I see one from Maria Williams, and I'm not sure if that one was addressed, which is, how do we know if there's an initiative that is already starting in our neighborhood?
Oh, we only have the past initiatives, and this is the beginning of neighborhoods applying. So there's no initiatives yet. Does that make sense? Yeah, if you want to figure out if your neighborhood was installed in the past, then you can use oh, I can find it for you. 17th, okay. Because we've only done 9 neighborhoods.
17th in Juneau, is that Fairview, Maria?
Yeah, I think it's North Fairview.
Cool. I don't know, Fairview hasn't done a project in the past. I think Chanel would know best if we've gotten any interest from Fairview this year.
I haven't seen anybody on the forums who said they wanted to install, but that can be changed. Like we can talk with your community council area. And also just to clarify, somebody asked about how neighborhoods are defined, and it's from the community council area boundaries. I will send a community council map for you all.
Yeah, community council boundaries has been the foundation and the structure of all campaigns that we've done for Solarize in the past. And it's worked really well because there's this very clear geographic boundary where folks are eligible to participate and who the discount is available to. Last year, something we did different than we did the previous 2 years is that we allowed or encouraged community councils to combine because sometimes there was community, like 1 or 2 volunteers in a community that wanted to do the program but couldn't get the interest. And then another neighborhood, there was the interest, but not the volunteers. And so we mixed and matched and made it work for folks. I think something different that Chanel is piloting this year than we've done in the past is I'd like to see what it looks like outside of a community council boundary. So if there's a different entity or organization that is out there that you'd like to facilitate, we'd love to support that.
Great. Thanks for uplifting that. Yeah, I think I only mentioned it once, but we are expanding to see if groups, member organizations, churches are interested. And yeah. Okay, does that address your questions? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I saw some more that were in the chat that I missed, so I apologize. I'll just read these, Chanel. First is Kenton Hill subdivision involved in working towards community solar yet? I don't believe so. Do you know anything different?
No, I don't know of anything. Unless Kristen, you've been involved with them. No. So prime opportunity. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, I see. Next, the next question, go ahead.
Yeah, so is there an authoritative source for average annual electric cost increases from Piaggio Electric over the last 10 to 20 years? And so this is a question that comes up a lot because one of the things the installers do on your site assessment is they'll try to figure out either your internal rate of return or your payback or whatever type of economic assessment you want to use. And one of the things that goes into that is how much they expect the price of electricity to go up over time. And so typically that's called, the cost increase of utility or the cost escalation. I've seen installers use anything from 3% up to 8%. This is obviously one of the things that you really want to pay attention to. We encourage them to use something between 3 and 5% because we think that's the most accurate. They will use, more than that. And, it's kind of a sales pitch type of thing. I have looked at the data over the last 20 years, and it really depends on which set of years you're looking at, because there have been years where there was all of a sudden big jumps in the price of electricity, and then there have been years where it stayed relatively stable. But if you look at, over the last 20-ish years, 3% is generally what you see.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yep.
Even for me.
And then someone asked what the typical return on investment is, and comparing it to something like upgrading insulation, replacing doors, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a really good question. And I think that's really going to depend on a case by case basis. So when you're upgrading the insulation on your house or weatherizing your house, it really depends on where you're starting from. So if you're starting with an uninsulated house and then you insulate your house, that's going to make a big difference. I will say that typically weatherization has a quicker payback than solar, but it also just depends on the individual situation. I've seen IRRs, a 6 to 7% IRR is pretty common. The other way people will discuss solar payback is just with like a simple payback. In Alaska, it's pretty rare to see a payback quicker than 9 years. 9 to 12 year payback for solar is pretty common. If you're in a situation where there's a lot of shade, it might be greater than that. I would say if you want to kind of really dive into this, that hour-long video on solar in Anchorage on the ACEP website really kind of dives into some of the economics, and so I would recommend you take a look at that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of the time I see installers say like 9 to 11 years where it's paid off itself. Yeah, great. Other questions I see are, have there been any installations on mobile homes? I actually don't know. Casey, has there been in past? Do you know?
I don't think with the Solarize program, and I think Chris might be the best person to answer that in general.
Great.
That's a good question. I haven't seen any in Anchorage, but I'm not going to say it's never happened. And I'm sure it's happened in the lower 48. But generally, you have to have a suitable structure to attach the racking to. And so mobile homes might not have that structure available. The other thing to say is these systems are all permitted through the municipality for structural and electrical. So they would have to be able to get permitted as well.
If that is a program that, Scott, you're interested in pursuing, I think we'd be happy to put some research into that.
Excellent. Thank you, team. All right. Jenny Marie, do you know which questions came in?
Yeah, I see a few from Richard, Jennifer, and I think Bill Falsey had a question too. Maybe Richard, oh, we covered your question actually. Jennifer asked, I think, I realize this is a presentation about solar, but are there thermal or other wind options for Anchorage? I'll hand it away.
I can jump on that. So those are options. However, I think what you're going to find is that the cost and the payback for both solar, thermal, and small wind are going to be slower than what you would find with solar PV. Small wind was really popular about 10 or 15 years ago, kind of before the price of solar came down. What my observation over time has been that maintenance is high, and sometimes those turbines make a lot of noise. They don't make neighbors very happy.
Because of the moving parts, the maintenance becomes high, whereas solar is like static. It's easier to keep.
Yeah, that's the beauty of solar, is there really is no moving parts. So there's not a lot to break. You do see things like inverters fail. Typically, most inverters have between a 10 and a 25-year warranty. So it is an electric part. So just like any electric part, it will break after time, but it doesn't have moving parts, so it tends to last longer. I see one here. What is the range of cost for an installation on a single family home? So Chanel touched on this really briefly in her presentation, but what I would say is it really depends on how much electricity you use, because the installer is going to size your solar system appropriately based upon how much electricity you use and how much you want to offset. Typically, if you were looking for the quickest payback, you would size your system to meet your consumption in May and June. If you wanted to produce more and offset your consumption in some of those shoulder months, it's gonna slow down the economic payback a little bit. But for some folks, that's what they choose to do. But a single family home in Anchorage, say you get a 4 kilowatt system, generally with Solarize Anchorage, we've seen costs between $3 and let's call it $3.30 a watt. And it kind of depends on the type of house you have. And so if 4 kilowatts, there's 4,000 watts. So 4,000 times $3, you're looking at $12,000. So $12,000 to $15,000 before the.
Right.
And if I could prompt, oh, sorry. Well, if I could prompt, Bill Falsey, you had a question too about like shared versus single structure. Can I prompt you to ask that one?
Yeah, thanks, Jenny Marie. I finally got it together and threw it in the chat just now. So I apologize. I missed part of the presentation because I was called away by a phone call. But my understanding is that the model we're describing here is really kind of a bulk purchasing model. But at the end of the day, I own my panels. I put them on my roof. I consume my electrons, or I net meter my electrons back to the grid. And at the municipality, we were just beginning to explore whether there are ways to cross at ownership lines, meaning like if my house, I'm very interested, but I'm in the shade, my neighbor is super solar irradiated, is there a way we can pool together? And we were running into some regulatory barriers, even when we were trying to figure out how could we put school district roofs into service, kind of thing. So I'm curious, have you guys run down that rabbit hole? Do you already have thoughts on that?
So the program itself hasn't looked into a like what the model you're describing. But I think Chris may know more about a like shared like electricity, if you do.
Sure, yeah. So kind of what you're referring to, you often hear it called third power party purchase agreements or something like that, where you know, you can purchase electricity from your neighbor because maybe they have a really good roof for solar or something like that. So policy wise, that's it's not allowed in Alaska. So really the only way that we really found to make solar work is when the person who owns the house actually owns the system as well. I think a case could be made from a regulatory point of view that leasing arrangements could work. No installers are doing that yet. And I think part of the problem is that it just, the economics aren't quite there like they are in other places like California or something like that. But that's what we've seen so far.
Thanks for that answer. And I might follow up with you on offline and bother you a little bit more about that. Because we were chasing that too and finding that at certain levels, too many customers, you'd literally have to get a certificate of public convenience, which means you'd be a regulated utility in the Chugach area, which is not going to happen. But it did seem like it could open a lot of additional potential if you could figure out how to crack that nut. Anyway,
yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk about that. And that issue comes up every couple of years. So, yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Any other questions?
Jennifer just posted a question in the chat too. Maybe I can ask you to ask it, Jennifer, instead of this Jenny talking. Or maybe I will ask it for the sake of convenience. So Jennifer popped in the chat, if you're on a solar system, can you continue to be on even pay system with the electric companies? Chris?
Sure. So really what Solarize focuses on is what's called grid-tied solar. And so that's where you basically have solar panels and you have what's called an inverter, and the inverter turns the DC electricity that's produced from the solar panels into the AC electricity that we use in our homes. So there's no need for batteries or anything like that. You know, for folks that have been around solar for a while, you may be familiar with the old systems where you had to have batteries and all kinds of things like that. We're specifically talking about grid-tied solar here. For folks that are interested in battery backup, that is an option, and that's really a conversation you should have directly with the stuff. So with grid-tied solar, you would still subscribe to your utility. I have a couple kilowatts of solar on my roof, and so basically what it does is I have a very low bill in you know, April, May, June, and July, and then for the rest of the year, you know, my bill would be somewhat lower, and then obviously this time of the year I pay the same bill that I would have paid if I didn't have solar. So it just basically reduces the cost of my electric bill, kind of in what we call the summer months or the spring months around here.
Yeah, and if you're getting a larger system at net zero, they call net zero because you produce more, produce enough to cover your house for the whole period. The rest of the year, you'll be using those net metering credits for a lot of it. Go ahead and speak.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, Chanel. I want to clarify that a little bit though. So people use the term net zero, meaning that you're going to produce as much electricity as you're going to consume on an annual basis. But the net metering policy in Alaska means that every month your net metering is reset. So if, for example, if you produce 100 kilowatt hours, but you only consume 50, then you have 50 kilowatt hours left at the end of the month. So what happens is that gets converted into money basically at what's called the avoided power cost, and we're getting kind of technical here. So I'll just go over it quickly, and if folks want to go over it more, I'm happy to do it offline. But so for example, at Chugach, that's usually like 5 or 6 cents a kilowatt hour, even though we pay retail cost about 6 cents a kilowatt hour. So those credits will pass from month to month, but you're not getting the full retail credit month to month. What is power cost month? If that makes sense.
Great. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, totally. It's really confusing, and even I have to remind myself how it works from time to time. So it gets kind of long.
All right. I see Jennifer asked, what is the lifetime of a panel / installation? Again, case by case, but I've seen like 25 years and up. Is that right? K and C?
Yep.
Yay. Then Bill asked another question about the model. Do you want me to orate, Bill, or do you want to say it?
I'm happy to defer to you. I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but the short version is when we priced it out for ourselves, the vendors that we talked to said, oh, we can't do it on your cedar shake roof. So if we're going to do a solar installation, we got to replace the roof too. So I'm curious, does the bulk purchasing model rope in those of us jokers who also need to do a roof replacement if we're going to play?
Goofy. I think the short answer is like no. The roof costs aren't included. Yeah, we had this discussion earlier about rooftop costs and the federal tax credits, but you have to speak with a tax consultant. Yeah, go ahead.
And I'm actually surprised that they wouldn't install it on a cedar roof, or I have a feeling that in other states where those are more common, they probably would, but in Alaska, a lot of the installers probably hadn't seen that yet. Yeah, they're not very good.
I think that we have seen this in previous Solarize campaigns. So I'd be interested in checking back in with installers who've participated before, because I think we have had that pop up.
Good to know. I'll follow up with you both, Kristen and Bill, about that, if you don't mind. All right, moving forward. Paul asks, any comments for solar on new residential construction? It's a prime time to get solar, I think, because the only like little tidbit there is utility bills are usually used during the site assessment, and there might be other nuances I don't know about. Chris, I defer to you once again.
No, I mean, the only thing I would say is, the first thing a lot of people are concerned about is this going to make my roof leak? Because you're obviously attaching things to the top of the roof. It's a totally valid question. I think there's been over 2 million systems installed in the country in the last 10 or 15 years. You don't see that kind of, you don't see those kind of numbers with technology that hasn't been proven. And so the mounting infrastructure and that kind of stuff has really improved. So we really don't see issues with roof leaks or anything like that. And I'm just trying to keep up with the if somehow we skipped you accidentally, I apologize. Feel free to throw your question back in there or something. So one of the questions from Bart says, I would expect the electric company would need you to contact them to basically get signed up for net metering. That's exactly right. And so the installers are responsible for submitting your paperwork, both for the permitting within the municipality and to get approved by the electric utility. So they take care of that because it does change how your bill looks a little bit.
Right.
And then Bart also asked if TrueGap buys power back for less than retail power, how are you going to make money? So I guess I should also say they will give you the retail credit to your consumption. So for example, you're basically offsetting your consumption. So you're getting essentially the retail value of your power. It's when you generate more than you consume, that's when they're giving you the avoided power cost, which is less than the retail cost. And then there's another question here about batteries and storing your own energy. I guess, Kristen, maybe you remember the cost of the batteries, but I would just say that battery systems aren't very standardized. So there's a lot of different options out there. So it's really just, you have to get a bid from the installer if you're interested in battery storage and that kind of thing. They are becoming more popular and they are coming down in price because people want to avoid power outages and that kind of thing. But I'll just stop there. Someone asked about an EPDM roof. I do know at least, so the installers do install on EPDM roofs. They have different types of relationships with roofers. Some of them, they'll have a roofer come in and install the actual mounts on the EPDM roof. Other installers are comfortable installing those mounts themselves and will warranty that work. So it really just depends on who the community chooses for the install to be their primary installer. What have I missed?
The question from Jennifer: can you power a shed shop independently of your home? Answer is yes. And sometimes, well, we've seen in the past where someone's shed has better sun access, I guess, and so they'll put their panels up on their shed or barn or whatever's in their back. They can power that structure, or it can go to your your home?
It also kind of depends how it's metered. So it's on a case by case basis.
Great. Thank you for my team of 4. Feel like making sure nobody falls through the cracks. We are now at 4:53. I want to leave 2 minutes for any final questions percolating but haven't been asked yet. So now is your time, truly. And then after that, we're done. And just getting started all at the same time. So very exciting. Bill asks, are there slides available online anywhere? I went through some slides here. I'm going to make them into a PDF version and then send them to attendees. So you'll get one hopefully by tomorrow. And again, I'm very excited to help lead you folks through Solarize campaigns of your own. If you're so interested, please do email me with your intent, and the application deadline is January 11th. Make sure to see if anybody of your friends and family are interested in volunteering, and folks in your community to show their interest. Oh, one last question, or 2 last questions. What is the website address for Solarize Alaska? We only have a website for Solarize Anchorage. We're at akcenter.org/Solarize. I'll type that. Oh, we also have a Facebook page. Last, solar siding or roofing material options in Alaska. You can get solar both on the side of your house and on the rooftop. You'll just have to check with installers whether or not that's the optimal place.
I just threw my email up in the chat as well for if folks have any other questions they think of later. So
Thank you. I'll follow suit. Alrighty. Thanks, folks. Yeah, that's all I've got for y'all. Kristen, Chris, any last thoughts?
That was great, Chanel. Thank you. I'm excited to see who all is interested in participating. And just a reminder to email Chanel your interest.
Yes. Thank you.
yeah, thanks everybody for taking some time out of your day. And we look forward to working with you.
Ooh, all right.
All right.
We can skedaddle. Bye. See you, folks. I'm going to stop the recording, Jenny Marie. See you, Mitch. Thanks for joining us.